Okay, so we've got some questions for you, Donna, but first I want to tell you, John this was at like 11:08, and John had said, really hoping to hear about the intersection of DevOps with the IT service management framework. How does DevOps fit in with the old ITSM model? And I just chatted back in with him and I said, did John answer your questions in this presentation, or do you have anything additional you'd like to ask more specifically? And he said, no, absolutely, you answered his questions. And he said, thank you very much, great presentation.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and then we have a question from Jason, and Jason is saying, how do we as owners of the incident management, problem management, change management processes actively engage and partner with DevOps folks who deem what we do as prohibitive to agile development, and can process design help with this?
So the first thing I would say is make sure that you have educated yourself on what DevOps is all about and that you really understand. Because I do think if you educate yourself on the promise of DevOps and on the core practices of DevOps, like continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous testing, you'll actually come to the realization yourself of how your processes are sometimes an impediment, because they are in the context of DevOps. So first of all, I would educate yourself, and that's going to serve two purposes. It's going to give you insight already into how you can improve your processes, but it's also going to give you a shared vocabulary. So it's going to enable you to get out there and have a conversation with these DevOps folks and be able to use their lingo, right? Or if nothing else, understand what they're saying to you when they're flying, lingo around. And start to have a conversation. And that's where I would start. I'd start to have a conversation about, either help me understand ways in which this process is an impediment to you doing your work, or can we agree on certain things? When you actually talk to people, a lot of times what you're going to find is people say, well, sure, we all agree that we've got to capture information about these incidents, or sure, we all agree we have, one of the core metrics of DevOps is mean time to recover. Well, you don't get mean time to recover metrics without recording incident data. That's just a fact. So can we agree on what the core metrics are, and can we agree, on basic things like we have to record all incidents or we have to record all problems, and how we're going to do that and how we're going to report on it, and let the conversation evolve from there. The other thing I would say to you is learn to conduct experiments. A big part of DevOps is, and in fact in DevOps there's three ways: flow, feedback, and experimentation and learning. If you learn how to experiment, and if you start talking to your counterparts in the DevOps side of the house about conducting experiments, you're speaking their language now, right? And they're going to embrace that, and they're going to get excited about that. So collaborate with your counterparts on conducting experiments, and then you have to be willing to go back and fight. And I get it. Some of you may have to have a little bit of you may have to really hone your reasoned argument skills in order to get your management team to agree to making changes to the process. Or if nothing else, agreeing that these procedural changes are appropriate for that team, and maybe we have some different procedures in place for other teams. You have to, as a process owner, be willing to stand up for that, and really ensure that your process is delivering value to that particular set of your customers. Hopefully that helped.
Yes, thank you, Donna.
But start by educating yourself.
And then Paul is asking, so then is DevOps the next evolutional step of ITIL, a replacement or a refinement of? I hear so much that DevOps will kill ITIL, and that makes no sense.
And I'm happy it makes no sense to you, because it doesn't make sense. DevOps relates to a very specific activity within IT, and that is software development and delivery. That's really what DevOps is focused on. And I know that some of you work in, I don't know, a desktop support team, and your job is to get out there and deploy desktops and laptops to your customers and to support those desktops and laptops. DevOps could care less about that. So ITIL and IT service management is really has very, very broad concerns, right? It talks about services, end-to-end services. DevOps is looking specifically at software development and delivery. Now, I get it. When we start talking about the cloud and we start talking about infrastructure as code, now infrastructure is software. I understand all of that, but it's still, DevOps is still only concerning itself with a part of what's happening within an IT organization. There are many, many activities. Let me go back to here. I actually have a slide. It's always, things are always further back than I think they are. I always think like, oh, it's the second slide. I'm not finding it. Well, I think it's here. So, you know, DevOps is looking at the software delivery, right? So here's the reality. ITIL isn't going anywhere anytime soon. IT service management as a greater concept isn't going anywhere anytime soon, because we're looking at, there we are. That's the slide I was looking for. IT service management concerns itself with things like making sure we have the right services, request fulfillment, right? I need to provide access to a new employee. I need to onboard a new employee and everything that involves, right? Giving them their laptop, giving them their access, giving them their, you know, card key so they can get in the building. DevOps could care less about all of that stuff. Where kind of DevOps and IT service management meet each other is in these areas of requirements to release, especially as it relates to software specifically, and certainly defect to correction, right? DevOps cares about those things. So, and when you really talk to folks about DevOps, they understand that they're doing IT service management. They're just not using the same vocabulary you are. They're not using the same systems that you are. So they don't relate to it the way you do because you're an expert in IT service management. But if you just start talking to people about stuff like how changes get made in the organization or how we handle incidents within the organization, and if sometimes you just have to get down to talking about how we handle defects, okay, I don't care. Right? Let's just talk about the fact that we change stuff breaks, we have to fix it. Right? We release new stuff and we have to think about the impact of that release on our customers. And you'll find common ground there. They're doing IT service management and DevOps. They just don't call it that. And that's okay, in my opinion. That's where it's our job, right? I think in IT service management to adapt our processes. And that's kind of what I talked about on that one slide, to adapt our processes in order to make sure everybody's happy, right? Dev is happy because they can quickly make their changes. IT service management's happy because it can track those changes. It knows who changed what, when they changed it. If in the event something goes wrong, or in the event we have to provide evidence to auditors, right? Everybody's goals can be achieved. We just have to be willing to adapt our IT service management processes in order to get there. And stop being so hung up on the vocabulary and on ITIL. You know, use ITIL as a reference guide. Use ITIL as what it is, and that is guidance. But ITIL, even ITIL tells you ITIL shouldn't be, ITIL's not prescriptive, right? It shouldn't be the Bible. It shouldn't be you know, how we do things cast in concrete. It's guidance. Sorry, that was like a rant. I was sweating after that answer. But it excites me talking about that.
But that was a good rant on it, because, and you circled it back into like right in the presentation you were saying, don't worry about the vocabulary. Just make sure you have common vocabulary.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Good, thank you. So I've got a question from, and forgive me if I pronounce your name incorrectly, but it looks like it's Rushdie. And Rushdie is asking, how are the best companies re-engineering the IT service management practices in light of DevOps and SRE?
Well, so that was what this slide I went through. These are examples of how the organizations are doing that. They're having conversations about how to shift their thinking from something being requested and having to go through a long approval process, for example, to something being recorded. They're using swarming techniques like chat ops. They are integrating their systems. I mean, these are all examples of what organizations are doing, and it really does require reengineering because it requires a willingness to kind of rethink, not the process itself, because the ultimate outcomes of the processes aren't changing, but the how of you know, the way the process is being done. So these are some examples that we're seeing. With SRE, you know, one of the things that's really interesting, and SRE is site reliability engineering for anybody who's not familiar with the term. And site reliability engineering is really about how high velocity organizations, so this is the Amazons of the world, the Googles of the world, how these companies that are, first of all, just, you know, high velocity of changes, high volume of transactions are occurring on a day-to-day basis. These organizations where reliability is so critical, there has to be, take DevOps and ramp it up by 100 and you have SRE, because there has to be a real agreement between the dev side of the house and the ops side of the house when changes are being made, that those changes aren't going to impact overall reliability of our services. And it's actually kind of the, DevOps and SRE kind of came up independently, but what we're seeing in looking at SRE is it, you know, one of the, I'm going to use the word failings, and it's not a fair word, but one of the failings of DevOps is that it thinks only about software. And what organizations who are introducing DevOps are finding is that, oh, we can't think about just software, we have to think about the service, because there are organizations that have introduced DevOps and are humming along really nicely with DevOps. They're deploying software changes on a daily basis, but their infrastructures are fragile. People's desktops are failing chronically, or people's laptops, you know, are old and rickety and they're not working effectively. So who cares, right? If you're deploying software changes really, really quickly, if the end-to-end service, right, everything that enables you to utilize that software isn't working effectively. So site reliability has really challenged organizations to look at that and appreciate that. So one of the things I started to say is, one of the things I think is cool about SRE is that when you talk SRE with folks, they talk about incidents and they talk about problems. I mean, they are very much attuned to these, what we would traditionally call idle processes, but it's IT service management, right? They're just doing it in much more of an automated way. So they're heavy into monitoring, they're heavy into the event management process to make sure that they're automatically detecting those incidents and their problems. They're heavily into automatically restoring service, right? So it's incident and problem management taken to a, you know, to the highest degree in terms of how automation gets introduced. These are the organizations where you're seeing things like Chaos Monkey, and what Chaos Monkey does is inject disruption into an environment, and the goal is to make sure that the environment can recover from that. So in other words, we can, I don't know, take down a server, but the customers will never be impacted as a result of it. So it's incident and problem management, it's proactive availability, capacity, continuity, security management, right, at the highest degree. So that was a long answer again, but hopefully it answered the question. These are examples of how organizations are re-engineering their processes. And they're using the techniques we talked about, like value stream mapping, like experimentation, like agile service management, you know, laid over top of the 10 steps, right? These techniques that we went through.
Thank you, Donna.
Mm-hmm.
And is site reliability engineering?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
We actually had a webinar a couple of months back about site reliability engineering. If anybody wants to learn more about it, if you go out to our archives, there's a webinar out there.
Yep, on our website. Yes, great. Thank you. Mary said that she had to leave, but she said great presentation. She's going to share it with her whole team.
Thanks. And if you want,
yeah, right.
if you want one of us to come and present it for you, we can do that. But I'm sure you're not to question your capability to do it. That sounded really rude, and I apologize for that.
You're just being enthusiastic.
I know. As the words were coming out of my mouth, I thought, well, that's rude. She's perfectly capable of presenting it herself.
And then Rusty had one other question. How does this impact application operations and support, which is given very little coverage in traditional IT service management?
I assume you're talking about production support, first of all. And you're right that IT service management, well, I don't know if you're right that IT service management doesn't talk about it. IT service management talks about it in the context, ITIL talks about it in the context of application support. So if you look at the service operation book, there's a whole entire section on application support and the role that they play in the IT service management processes. You are right that it doesn't spend a lot of time talking about it, but it does acknowledge the role of application support. So what I do want to say, though, in the context of DevOps is that DevOps really changes the game there, right? Because the promise of DevOps is that we're never knowingly passing defects downstream. So whereas historically in a lot of organizations, application support is working on bugs, maybe they're working on correcting defects that only require X amount of development time or require making X% of changes to code. If you're doing DevOps right, those defects shouldn't be coming down the pike. So we are hearing about some organizations where production support or application support certainly still is interfacing with the user community, but is maybe starting to do things like tackle some technical debt that may have built up along the way. But again, if you're doing DevOps right, you should really be significantly reducing the number of defects that go into production that have to be handled by application support. So I think it'll affect application support more and more as time goes by, depending on how real DevOps becomes in your organization. What role your team will play going forward. If DevOps isn't in the game in terms of your organization, then certainly you'll continue to play that role of managing the production defects and managing that user relationship in the context of things like incident and problem management.
Thanks, Donna.
That was probably a really unsatisfactory answer, and I wrote myself a note to kind of do a little homework and see if I could have given a better answer. So look for a blog. If I find out more, I'll post a blog.
Oh, good. Thanks, Donna. All right, and those are all the questions that I have this morning. That was a great Q&A session, so thank you, everybody, for participating in that. And thank you, Donna, for answering all those on your feet. I know that was a lot of questions for you, so appreciate that.
Happy to.